Hello everyone, this is 8-Bit Flashback, and welcome to 80s Flashback. The 80s host a lot of special memories from my childhood. I was introduced to the 80s when I was only 6 months old, so pretty much my whole childhood was the 80s. There was a lot of great toys, movies, music, and a lot of awesome video games. So myself and a couple other YouTubers got together to share some of our favorite memories from the 80s. And also joining us today is the very strange and weird Mex Headroom.
So, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
So what's my favorite toy from the 80s? Well, that's a hard one. When I was just a little guy, wrestling was one of my favorite things to watch, but not my favorite toys. And remember Garbage Pail Kids? They're not necessarily a toy, but I had a lot of fun with these. My sister had Cabbage Patch dolls, and I had Garbage Pail Kids. And of course, I can't forget about He-Man. He-Man looked a lot like Conan the Barbarian. He had giant muscles, a giant sword, and just like Conan, he also walked around in his underwear. His alter ego was Prince Adam, with no superpowers, but once he holds up his magical sword and says, "By the power of Grayskull, I have the power!" He then transforms into the mighty powerful He-Man, along with his cowardly pet tiger Cringer, who becomes Battle Cat. And together they defend the castle of Grayskull from the evil villain Skeletor, who also has magical powers of his own.
Well, I can't remember the last time I was this entertained.
The He-Man toy line and cartoon provided so many great memories for me. I remember running around the yard with a broomstick chanting "I have the power," thinking I was He-Man.
So you're telling me, you used to play with dolls?
No, actually these are called action figures, not dolls. And they provided me a lot of entertainment as a kid. But as much as I liked He-Man, it still wasn't my favorite toy. My favorite toy from the 80s would have to be Transformers. Optimus Prime, Megatron, Soundwave, which is probably my favorite Transformer, Sidekill. Oh wait, that was GoBots. They were fun, but not near as cool.
Remember GoBots? Me neither.
Transformers let you play with a toy in two modes, robot mode and transformation mode. Soundwave turned into a boombox with miniature cassettes that also transformed. How cool is that? All the miniature cassettes would run spy missions for Soundwave.
You still alive out there? Good.
Megatron turned into a realistic looking pistol that actually shoots small plastic pellets. And Optimus Prime turns into a not so cool looking semi.
Well, at least he doesn't have flames.
Transformers were my favorite toy, and judging by my collection, I guess they still are. Another honorable mention would be G.I. Joes, but they're probably in third place.
Actually, judging by that collection, you're a certified nerd.
Video games were also a huge part of the 80s for me. I grew up playing Atari a lot. Games like Miss Pac-Man, Junior Pac-Man, Pitfall, Donkey Kong, Mario Bros, and more provided me with a lot of entertainment and got me hooked.
What's the deal with all these video games? What's the obsession? What's all the rage about? It's just a digital picture on a screen that you remote control. It's not even real. Wait a minute. Oh no.
Atari might have got me addicted, but the game that really changed everything for me, and this sounds like such a simple answer, but it's true, Super Mario Bros. All the games I played before this just lacked the depth, variety, and level design that Super Mario Bros. Offered. There was castle levels, treetop levels, water levels, underground levels, and so much more, and this has to be one of the most iconic tunes ever.
So you're saying Super Mario Bros. Is one of your favorite games? That's like me saying Coca-Cola is one of my favorite drinks. But you know what? I've been living a lie. Pepsi is my favorite drink and always has been.
The objective of the game, just like every other Mario game, is to save the princess from the evil Bowser. The game consisted of 8 worlds with 4 levels in each world. And for me, this is the game that really showcased what a side-scrolling game should be. and set a new successful blueprint standard for future side-scrollers, such as the highly successful Super Mario Bros. 2 and 3. Super Mario Bros. Had it all: adventure, action, romance, fantasy, longevity, a great soundtrack, and amazingly precise controls. When you see a game like this today, it doesn't seem like that big a deal, but back in 1985, this game was groundbreaking.
And now, I'd like to share a memory of my own. This one time, I was in a TV, but not like a crappy TV, a nice TV. It was a Sony. Those were the days.
Super Mario Bros. Is one of the best-selling video games of all time, and some people, including myself, even give it credit for reviving the video game industry from the big crash of 1983. I remember the first time playing Super Mario Bros., I don't think I left my room for the entire weekend, except to eat or go to the bathroom. I was addicted as I fireballed, warped, and stomped my way to the end.
Oh, the childhood memories. I remember them so distinctly. Having to get tuned in all the time, hoping I wouldn't get scrambled. What I want to know is, why are the only funny lines on this show the ones behind me?
So growing up in the 80s, this is the game that had the most impact on me. It's hard to imagine what video games would be like if Mario didn't exist. And as long as Nintendo keeps making Mario games, I'm gonna keep saving the princess.
Well, it's time for some bad jokes. Hey, Bit, how's the fan mail going? His response? Well, I haven't had any yet. And now I'd like to welcome Gamer Sketch. He might not have been born in the 80s, but trust me, he's all 80s.
Hey everyone, I'm Gamer Sketch, and even though I wasn't around during the 80s, it's home to some of my favorite things in pop culture. Popular media in the 80s was amazing, whether it was TV shows, music, video games, or even movies. And one of my favorite movies of all time is 1985's Back to the Future. In my opinion, it's without a doubt one of the greatest movies ever made. It has some of the most fun and quotable characters ever put to screen and great, pretty timeless special effects. The story revolves around young Marty McFly accidentally being sent back in time and messing up the meeting of his parents. But I mean, you know that. Back to the Future has risen to be one of the most iconic properties in the world. It even has good sequels. Well, one good sequel. Another iconic thing from the 80s was the Nintendo Entertainment System. But it wasn't all just about video games. There were cool accessories that came with it too. Like r.o.b, the robotic operating buddy. You hook this bad boy up and he'll help you kill all these little green guys. Well, maybe not. Or the Power Glove, which is literally useless. It didn't work then, and it won't ever work now. It looks cool, and if you snap your fingers, maybe it'll wipe out half the universe. So, I guess it's at least got that going for it. Gamer Sketch over and out.
And up next is Glenn from Glenn's Retro Show. And retro is what Glenn's about.
Hey, thank you very much for having me on again, 8-Bit Flashback. Now this is a tough question. What's my favorite thing from the 1980s? Very tough call. Is it a TV show, an animated show, a game console? I'm probably going to go with a gaming console, but what gaming console, what system would I say, for me, defined the 1980s? That was my most cherished device. Let's see if we can find out. One can't think about the 1980s without thinking about the Coleco Minicades. But is that my favorite thing from the 1980s? This is a tough one. The Atom and the ColecoVision was definitely a huge thing in the 1980s. right before the great video game crash. But is that my favorite thing from the 1980s? The NES came out in 1986, and I got my r.o.b unit. But is that my favorite thing from the 1980s? I definitely have a soft spot for the Amiga. But is that the favorite thing I have from the 1980s? And then there's Vectrex from 1982. Is that my favorite thing from the 1980s? The Atari Lynx was one heck of a system. Never really truly appreciated in its time. Is that my favorite thing from the 1980s? Here it is. The system I chose as my most favorite console or thing from the 1980s. It's the Vectrex. Now the Vectrex came out in 1982, and it was the first and only system to come with a built-in vector monitor. All consoles back then, you'd hook up to your own TV set and take it away from your parents. But the Vectrex, you had the arcade experience literally at home. Had a great sound card, built in, great sound effects, the best visuals because vectors could scale and zoom just like the arcades. And it just even looks great. I mean, if you look at the original Apple Macintosh, and tell me they didn't copy the Vectrex. They most certainly did. And it had a lot of firsts. I mean, obviously it was the first with a vector monitor. It was also the first with a 3D imager.
It feels cheap and flimsy like a kid's toy because that's what it is. And it's not very comfortable, it's imager, but it's impossible to play without the 3D effect.
Now, I don't have the original 3D imager, but I know my friend Vectrex Rolly sure does. But I do have an aftermarket one. And again, from technology from 1980, the 3D effects that this thing was able to produce was pretty amazing. It also supported a light pen.
Let's take the cursor with the light pen. That's the first step. As you saw now, there's a feature to draw this flower quite quickly.
Which is also something pretty common with computers back in the day, but not with a console. So that was also pretty innovative. It also had speech games back then. You didn't require a special cartridge. They had games like Spike that actually had speech in the game. So, if you're asking me, and ask me today, ask me tomorrow, what my favorite console from the 1980s is, it's going to be my Vectrex. Now, back to you, 8-Bit, and thanks for having me on once again, everyone. Game on.
I'd like to give a special thanks to Gamer Sketch and Glenn's Retro Show for contributing their time and helping make this video. And I'd like to give a big shout out to a very special person that's breathtaking, inspiring, stunning, imposing, stirring, impressive, affordable, fearsome, dreaded, and mind-boggling, not to mention mind-blowing, yours truly, Next Headroom. Anyone else out there getting tired?